Hi, and welcome to the Write Habit podcast. I'm Nicole, your host, and today I have a special conversation for you with Claire Benn, who is an amazing researcher, and she has been in my 90-day program to help writers get their articles and books done. And I'm so excited to talk to her because she is going to tell us all about her amazing research, all about the difficulties that can happen in writing, but also how she has overcome them and how she is now helping other writers to improve their writing and to get their habits back on track. Because I've seen Claire not just once, I've seen her in the 30-day program, but I've also seen her in a workshop that I gave, and I experienced how she then started mentoring others and gave really amazing tips in the room. So already there's a spillover effect to so many more writers who can benefit from conversations like this. So welcome, Claire.
Well, thanks, Nicole. It's a very generous introduction, I feel.
Don't be humble. You are amazing. And we're going to dive into all the things that listeners can learn from you to just get their writing habits going and overcome those times when it's really sticky. And we all do have those times. But I think first, I'd love for you to introduce yourself so that the listener knows who you are, what you work on, and what your focus is.
My name is Claire Benn. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Cambridge, and I did all of my degrees in philosophy, and that's still what I do now. And my current research focus is on the ethics of artificial intelligence, which is wonderful because most people think that philosophy is irrelevant to their everyday lives. But here is one place where philosophy has really got the chance to shine in terms of being very relevant and almost, dare I say, cutting edge.
Awesome. I love that. And I love how you're bringing this really century-old approach of philosophy into something so current that most people can't wrap their head around it. And there's, might even be scared of all the things around artificial intelligence, what it means to us as human beings and also as writers and just for future generations. So I love that. That's so amazing. How are you feeling at the moment about the projects that you're working on, about your writing?
So it's been a really interesting summer. So the last couple of years have been extremely busy for me doing other things. I started a new role here in Cambridge 2 years ago, and I launched a new MPhil program. And so there was a lot of work involved in there and a lot of time dedicated to non-research activities. Prior to that, then I had been on maternity leave for a year. And prior to that was really the pandemic. And so I felt like I'd been out of the game for a really long time, which is why I was so glad to join your 90-day program. Like it really was something that really kickstarted things. And we can get maybe more into that and how. But this summer, I have been trying to be so strict about spending time in the library, putting aside dedicated time for research. And it has been twofold. On the one hand, actually, it's been wildly successful. I've done a lot more writing than I thought I would get done. I have finished off some projects. I'm very bad at finishing things in general. But actually, the last week has been really interesting because I have gone back to a subject that I worked on my PhD. And it brought back a whole wave of anxiety and a feeling of like, oh, like I'll never get my head around these things. It took me right back to my PhD angst almost instantly. I'm rereading some of the papers I read for my PhD, and I'm going back to that topic. And it was really, really funny, actually, how I'd been this real high of success, getting a few things done that I'd wanted. And it almost instantly evaporated, kind of going back to this topic. So, a mixed bag.
When did you do your PhD? How long ago was that?
So I'm 12 years post PhD.
Okay. And how did the PhD journey go for you? You said you felt right back in that persona that you feel like you've outgrown it. Now you were right back in it. How was that PhD time for you? I can already say that my PhD was not always great, but I want to know from you.
Well, so it was really quite mixed. I really loved my topic. I still do, which is why I still write about it. And I actually chose a really happy topic, which I think is quite unusual in philosophy. We're quite used to focusing, especially in ethics, which is my background, on the negatives. So ethicists like to talk about liars and murderers and thieves and so on, promise breakers and all that good stuff. Whereas my PhD was about going above and beyond the call of duty. And so I got to spend 4 lovely years looking at people who forgave each other, people who gave each other presents, people who saved people from burning buildings and donated blood. It was quite a happy time in terms of the content, but the writing was a struggle. I think that's true for most people writing a PhD, in particular in philosophy, because you're writing alone, you're not working in a lab or in a little community. It was quite isolated. I went through personally like a few hard times during that period as well. So that was tricky. But actually, the worst part was just post PhD when I was trying to get things published. So this is really what it took me back to, this real sense of like inadequacy of I like this work, but actually it's going out into the world right now and nobody else seems to like it as much as I do. I wasn't taught explicitly how to approach publishing. Sort of the attitude was, well, you write stuff that's good enough and then you send it out, right? And then it gets published. And I think the world had really changed quite a lot between when, say, my professors were at my stage and what publishing looked like then to the situation I was in. And also then I actually think genuinely that I'm not hugely great at publishing. It's probably my weakest academic skill. I'm not very good sometimes at judging how things will be received, how it will fit into existing discourses. I'm ideas driven. So I have an idea that I like, and that's the thing I write about. And at the end, I think, well, how can I kind of fit this into the right framing where it's actually a piece of communication and not just a purely creative output of my brain? And so that's something that I'm still working on. But the continual rejection I received in that 3-year period of sending things out and having it rejected, that was rough. That's where I got into some really bad habits, being very avoidant.
I remember in my own PhD, the ride was good and bad. There were times when I was blocked. There were times when I pulled it together. But I also remember, I think it took me at least 1 or 2 years to have my first article published from the PhD. And even then, I was just so lucky that I found an editor who really believed in my work. And I went through 4 rounds of editing. And she just kept sending it back to the peer reviewers saying, okay, so here's the next version. What do you think now? Until all 3 of them said, okay, fine, it's good enough. And I must say, after, I also did my PhD in politics at Cambridge. So I had thought it would be a bit of an easier ride. And so this constant rejection, I think that's one of the hardest things in writing, unless you publish it on a blog or something where you self-publish, you are maybe more supported. But as soon as there is like a gatekeeping process and a sort of judgment process, that can get really tricky because it seeps into the writing itself. When you're sitting down at your desk and you are actually excited about your project, you're excited about editing, but then you remember, okay, someone's going to read this and someone's going to judge me. And
Yeah.
that is so hard.
I think
Yeah.
that you can often end up writing something, I say, death by 1,000 qualifications. Instead of writing something kind of bold and punchy and streamlined, then you can kind of end up qualifying and qualifying so much to forestall potential criticisms that you end up writing something kind of bland and complicated unnecessarily. And then I think people critique it because it's all knotted up and like, overly hedging, ironically, in the attempt to avoid that criticism.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a real mental process to go through first when you write up, especially research, but I think also in other like nonfiction genres for sure. You're sort of very guarded and try to cover your back with a lot of proof, evidence, and maybe even over explaining, just so that everyone who might have something to say about it, can be appeased. But that, as you just said, right, your own voice can easily get lost.
And I think a really big part of it for me is also security. When it's insecure, you really need these publications. Now that my job is relatively secure, then I can take the time and say, no, like I don't want to make those changes. Or, oh, it's okay if it gets rejected there because I have the time to wait a year, maybe, for it to get published somewhere else. But actually, straight out of my PhD, when I was thinking, like so many people are, how precarious the situation of a postdoc is, and that you need these publications in order to make this career happen, or it might not happen ever for you. That is so stressful, and the stakes are so high. And yeah, it's really, really tricky not to take all those criticisms really to heart.
I remember those times. Being on the job market as an academic I feel like it's sort of character building.
Or character breaking, depending on how it goes.
It's literally make or break. And I don't actually think that anyone who says this is not for me, I'm leaving academia didn't make it. I also left on the contrary, but it's a game that you play and there's a lot of mindset involved. That is very tricky to manage. Did you have anything that helped you during that time? I don't know, if maybe a mentor, or do you feel like when you're looking back now, you said it was a hard time, but somehow you got through it and now you're, an assistant professor. Do you think there's something that you might give to the reader where you felt like that helped you? A practice, a person, an approach?
Two things really made a big difference. One was that I wrote some non-academic pieces, well, not non-like peer-reviewed journal articles. So I wrote for a magazine at one point, I think I wrote a blog post, and I gave lots of presentations. And actually, these gave me the positive feedback and the confidence in my ideas that I was lacking in the peer reviewing process. So that was really helpful, especially the magazine article I wrote. It was really fun. You could just say things, you could just have opinions, and actually that's what they were looking for. And so you didn't have to say, well, I'm saying this in this way, and I know those people think this, and talking to them, but instead you could just say stuff, and it was a little bit more relaxed and freeing. And so I had, at least at some points, the opportunity to just write more freely. And that was really, really great. And have some small wins that took the sting a little away from some of the reviews that I received. And the other thing that was huge is that I was a postdoc, and it just so happened, it was an interdisciplinary postdoc program. It just so happened that there were 5 of us, all women, all doing philosophy at the same time at this academy. And we got together every week through the 5 years that I were there to talk, to share ideas, to give each other work in progress, to give updates, to co-write, check in with each other. And that level of support was just the most transformative, wonderful thing. Because when you were feeling really bad about your work, you could take it and say, oh, I just think this is boring or crazy. What do you think? And they would go, no, I think this is excellent. Oh, I'm so excited about that idea. Or they'd say, oh, well, I think you're not really discussing this problem, which might be a really good thing to address. And it just gave you the support and community after 4 years of feeling quite alone doing the PhD. Absolutely vital.
I can really feel that. And this is what I also experience now as a business owner and writing all kinds of things. When you don't have a community, yes, you can still write. Yes, you know how to write, but it is just so sticky. And the inner critic or whatever sort of worrying thoughts are going round and round in your head, nothing from the outside is stopping them. And there are tools to deal with this and to get yourself out of this. But if when you are still always feeling alone, I find that one of the hardest things. And just having a community around you, we do it in the 90-day program. You did it at your academy. This alone is worth so much. And I did have that a little bit during my PhD. We had a writing group, University of Cambridge writing group, and we met before COVID. And we actually met all the time, every single day. And I remember then when I came out of maternity leave at that time, it pulled me out of that mix between fear and brain fog and, oh, now I have a baby, I can't do it, like all these hard things. I had a place to go. We were meeting rooms in different colleges.
Mm.
And we were chatting and writing. And that alone, having a community of people who are sort of in it with you, who even speak the same language, right? You had people that understood exactly what it means to be in your position. That is worth gold. Absolutely. And I love what you also say about other type of writing. I do actually have a lot of clients who are academics, but also poet or sort of memoirist, but also writing short essays and things like that, just to ping pong sort of the thing that feels harder and bigger and where there is more attached to it, your purpose, your career, your mission in the world, the thing you want to really say in the world, versus I can take it lightly. There's something small and I can feel accomplished. These are amazing tips. You should actually be a writing coach.
I am very, very good at giving advice. I'm not so great at following it.
Well, that's for everybody. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying there. I wondered if you would give us a glimpse a little bit into the bigger picture of Claire. This is probably a bit of a meta question. You're a philosopher, so you can take it. What would you say if you had a mission in the world, like a deeper purpose, because something led you to this topic, something led you to becoming a professor, something led you to wanting to research, to wanting to teach. There's something there that brought you to where you are now. What is that you want to give to the world? if you don't mind that really big question.
That's a really interesting question because actually, I think so. Currently, right now, I run an MPhil program, and I always think, I don't know if I should tell them this, but I feel what has got me to where I am now is a whole bunch of chance and luck and happenstance. Because in some ways, what happened was I went to school at the age of 4, and I really loved it, and I was pretty good at most of it, and I stayed. Essentially, that's what happened. I stayed in school and I finished my A levels, and then I went to university and I've just stayed in education. And what I love about it is that I love learning. Like I really, really enjoy learning new things. And my parents, I think at one point asked me about what I do as a professional philosopher, right? They said, "Do you just sit around and think about stuff?" And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, really, I have this incredible privilege, which is that I can sit for an hour and just have a big old think about stuff that interests me. And that's a real privilege and a wonderful opportunity that I enjoy very, very much. But the other thing that I really enjoy doing that's much more about other people is that I love teaching. It's a really big part of what draws me to academia. And sometimes I think I actually enjoy it more than I enjoy research. I find it more rewarding. I think it probably matches my natural skill set a lot better. But I know what's definitely kept me in academia is my love of teaching.
Ah, that really resonates. And I think, a lot of the listeners on the podcast are people who may not be an academic, but just they have a love for something. They have a drive. They have a voice that tells them, this is fantastic. And I want to tell everybody about it. It could be a novel, it could be memoir, it could be, a beautiful poem, or it could be academic research written in a book or written in an article to sort of, yeah, make an impact, to stir a conversation. And even in the teaching, it's maybe not technically writing, although you are writing probably, part of that teaching, just being someone who takes information or takes story or takes inner wisdom in whichever way and then shares it. This is the only people I want to hang out with because I just love that.
And that is one of the reasons I'm really excited about the topic I predominantly work on now, which is the ethics of AI, because so many of the issues about AI, I mean, one is that it's really captured the public imagination. Lots of people are interested outside of academia in this topic, but so many of the issues behind it end up being philosophical questions. And I think that it is a big part of human nature to be interested in philosophical kinds of questions. And this is one place in which we, as a whole community of people, can really engage on that level. And so, kind of finding ways to articulate relevant kind of concepts and terminology, and to share risks and problems, and provide frameworks for thinking things through about something which is one of the most transformative things of our time. Yeah, it's great fun.
What are you curious about there? What sort of questions around AI and humanity, essentially, right? What are piquing your interest here? What is it that makes you like, hey, hang on, I want to dig really deep on this?
Well, I have sort of accidentally written most of a short book. I was writing a piece about deepfakes and democracy.
Will
Maybe
you just take a second and
sure.
explain deepfake, just for anyone who hasn't come across the term? What's an example of deepfake?
So they are synthetic videos that tend to depict real living people, and they tend to make them say or do something they didn't really say or do. So classic ones include ones of there's images that were produced of Donald Trump getting arrested that didn't really happen, or ones of famous people, particularly in politics. But actually, the vast majority of deepfakes are pornography.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I mean,
Yes, probably about 99% of them are pornography. Yeah. And almost all of those exclusively of women. Um,
mm-hmm.
so lots of people have been worried that now, whenever we see a picture, it might be a deep fake. We can no longer tell what's real and not real. And the people worried about how this might influence elections and so on. And I was writing more philosophically about how actually this provides a challenge to the justification of democracy. But I won't get into that because that actually probably will be quite boring for people not interested in philosophy. But what happened was, is I started by saying I should probably give a good definition of what a deep fake is. And that got longer and longer and longer. And I thought, well, I can't fit this in here. I'll take it out and I'll make that a separate paper. So I took those 4,000 words and I took them out And I gave a very simple definition and wrote that chapter. And then I got back to this paper about how should we define deepfakes. So I love the fact that you asked me, well, what are they? Because that's actually where I am right now. That's what I'm working on. But that is now like 13,000 words. And instead, what I've done is I've pitched it as a book. And so what this really, I think, shows is that we have this phenomenon, it's real, it exists in the world, people are really concerned about it, but there's lots of interesting philosophical questions behind it. So, which things are deepfakes? Like, what should we count as a deepfake? And what's the purpose of this concept? Because that's really how we're going to answer the question of how we should define it, is what's the concept doing? Concepts have function, they play roles, maybe they can explain things, maybe they can help us articulate particular experiences. Sometimes they play explicitly ethical roles. And so that's kind of what this book is in part going to explore. It's going to be a history and philosophy of deepfakes.
Awesome. Have you written a proposal or have you
Yes.
already?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So where are you now? Are you waiting to hear back? Is there something?
No, it's been accepted. I actually just had to find the time to finish it.
Oh, congratulations. Amazing. Are you allowed to say where you're under contract or is that still?
Well, I haven't signed it yet, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Good. Okay, good, 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 good. Once you know, tell me because I'll put it in the show notes for
Okay.
later. When the
Yeah.
book gets launched, everybody needs to know this. I find this super fascinating. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a sort of really weird mix between spiritual and pragmatist, and I wouldn't think but I just couldn't stop listening to what you said. So super excited about the book. Congratulations. Claire, okay, so you also told me that you're looking to join the 90-day accelerator again. Just tell me a bit about maybe your experience when you joined the 90-day for the first time. You probably joined because something wasn't going as well as it could have. And then when you were in it, what was your journey?
I've been so stuck with my writing for such a long time, and carving out time initially was the first big barrier. So it's like if I sign up for this and I have made a commitment to somebody else, that is going to mean that I'm spending the time doing this. So that was like the first part that really made a big difference because I had something in the calendar that was unmovable, that was uncancelable, that I had to show up for. And then the other part of it is that the exercises that we did, or even just having to really articulate what it was I was working on, being more concrete about what it was, that was so helpful. I mean, the first thing that we did was you made me list out all the projects I had on the go, and I think I had 7 unfinished favors. And you were like, well, that's crazy. We should maybe pick maybe a
I
maximum.
remember that.
3.
Yep.
I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. But actually, when I listed them all out, I realized, nobody could make good progress on 7 things at the same time. And instead, what happened was I'd work on one, and the other 6 would still be kind of sitting over in the corner whispering at me that I wasn't working on them and failing at something. And that was very demotivating. So narrowing it down was really important. And the other big thing that the program really helped me with was that I was carrying around with me a lot of hang-ups, and I don't know if shame is too big a word, but things were hanging over me. There were things that my definition of them would have been like, here is the set of papers that have been finished for 4 years that I have failed to get published. And until I get rid of them all, it's just this feeling of for 4 years, I have just sat on these and they could have been published and I could have had them out and they haven't been. And all they do is get rejected and all that sort of thing. And so by being really pragmatic in that course, picking some, working on them and saying, right, this is the one I'm going to get it over the line. And these are the ones I'm actually going to let go of. So one of the papers during that 90 days was one I said, this is not salvageable. I tried to make it work for years, and actually there's a big problem at the heart of it, and I don't really want to fix it. I don't want to work on this anymore. And I am not someone who lets go of stuff like that very easily. I put so much of my heart and soul into it, and you feel like, I'm sure many other people feel the same, that, what was it all for then? But I realized that it was a massive opportunity cost. And so I let it go. I just put it in the bin and said, no, it's not that I'm going to come back to it later. No, it's not going on the back burner with the other 6 papers that I have. It's just going. And it really just got me unstuck. And so I have now, bar one paper, one paper left, have got rid of the backlog of things that I was previously working on. And the issue was that because it was a backlog, because they were things I had worked on for years and years and years, I was bored to tears of them. They were good ideas, they were fine papers, but like I didn't want to have to work on them anymore. I had loads of new shiny ideas that were much more appealing. And so now that I've got through that backlog, I really have had the opportunity to write some new things. So, in the last 12 months, then I have written two new papers, like things that started in the last 12 months and have finished in the last 12 months. And I think that I really needed that in particular to get through that whole big menacing looming pile of things I felt that I had kind of failed at.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I remember every single person who's coached with me, and I remember when you said I have 7 projects, and it took a while to get them off your list. How did it feel when you consciously uncommitted from them?
Oh, freeing. Yes.
Mm.
And actually what happened was is that there was a big chunk of that paper I reused elsewhere in the end, accidentally. It wasn't a deliberate plan, but I got to a bit of a different paper and thought, oh, I have a whole thing about that and I can totally use it. So that felt very satisfying, but it was very freeing. Anyone who has engaged in any sort of decluttering, I'm sure knows that very particular sensation of relief, of letting something go. Mm.
Yeah. Freedom is one of my 3 top values. And just even those smaller moments, don't always have to free yourself from the big thing, like the job, the marriage, or like, this massive thing in your life. Sometimes it's a hard, but maybe smaller shift of I'm letting this paper go to make space for this other amazing thing. And how wonderful is it that you were able to salvage some of that? Isn't that so great that the universe just said, okay, well, she managed to let go. She chose freedom. Now we're going to give her a little reward. Copy paste 4,000 words or whatever, right?
Yep.
It's lovely. It's lovely.
That's very
I
nice.
really, yeah, totally. Okay, Claire, so tell me, since you've been in the program, it's been a little bit, it's been almost like a year.
Yeah.
What's changed since then in maybe your way you approach your writing, your relationship to writing?
So really, I feel unstuck. That was the main thing. I really feel like I look forward to it. I make the time for it. Apart from this recent piece that I said threw me back to the angst of my PhD and post-PhD days, then it's been fun. And so some practical things that came out of the course that I have then since implemented is that I keep my mornings free as much as I can. In term time, as much as I can means maybe 2 days a week. But if I keep them free of meetings that are planned and kind of share this expectation with the people I have to have meetings with, then it does mean that they keep more free than not. And that's been really big because I realized that I don't work well after lunch. I'm trying to do, say, an hour at a time, but really a whole clear morning where I can do an hour and a half, take a coffee break, hour and a half before lunch. Those are the best days. And because I don't have an office to myself, then I don't work well in the open plan office that I share on research at least, then I need to be somewhere else. And so like an hour's amount of time I just realized wasn't going to work because getting somewhere, setting up, getting settled, and then having to leave, I just find really tricky. So making the time has been the absolute key because without that, you really can't get anything else done. Being able to work on new ideas has been just for intrinsically very motivating. And next year, then my teaching workload should also be lighter. So I'm hoping to kind of take that forward. And that's why I want to do the program again, because like the times I spent in the program, sort of 1 hour a week we had with the coaching and the power hours we had, that was the only time I had to write. Whereas this time, I'm hoping for a little bit of time outside of that as well to dedicate to getting some research done.
Yeah, that's such an important insight, and it sounds small, but you set boundaries around your writing time as much as possible within the world that you are in, right? You got that little bit piece of freedom. You let others know. You also understood your own energy levels. You understood that you are more of a morning writer. I can see that, from the first time we met until now, like over, yeah, a year later, you know how to also self-coach and tweak your system, busy term time, less busy term time, within sabbaticals, outside of sabbaticals. So to be able to continuously adjust how you are carving out that time getting motivated. That is the real long-term skill that you're going to get from this, even after the program, and not just while someone says, okay, tell me, what did you write this week, and holds you really strictly accountable.
Well, I should say for anyone listening that I fail at this maybe the majority of the time, but I do at least know what I'm trying to do. And I think that's been really key. And of course, because I know it, I can put things in place that do mean that it gets realized sometimes at least. But of course, life continuously gets in the way. I had a couple of clear days of writing, really excited. I have 2 kids, kid gets sick, off daycare, and that's it. Those days are gone. But if I put it in place enough, and the fact it gets interrupted 50% of the time still means I have 50% of my mornings for writing. You have to have, I think, like a buffer. You need to set aside far more time than you think. And the other big thing is that because of that, I now give myself much more sensible deadlines. So we did that exercise as part of the course where you were saying, so how many free days do you have? And I counted and I was like, oh, I think I have 10 in the next 3 months. I was like, oh, so my idea that I'd get 3 papers finished is crazy. There's no way that's going to happen. So I had to really readjust. And so even now, I talked to the editors for this book and I said, yeah, January 2027. And really, I've written half of it. It's one of the Cambridge Elements books, so it's only 20 to 30,000 words. So I've written, more than half. And I was like, no, I think if I look ahead and I'm really honest, I think I need a year. I think I'll really need a year. And I'd rather than hand it in earlier, maybe next summer. That's really my goal, but give myself the flexibility of then not feeling guilty about it.
And that's, it's a real gift also to your future self, where you don't put this immense pressure on her, but she knows she has a good amount of time to fit in being a mother, being a lecturer. I think that is such a great way to go into the new year. I know we are only in August as we are recording this, right? But it is just you're gifting yourself this, the calm, the nervous system that can be calm and, stay on it and be realistic, but also not write under constant stress and pressure and end up hating the book that gave you so much joy when you started it. What would you say to someone listening and thinking about joining the 90-day accelerator, but maybe they're on the fence? Maybe they have a busy time at the end of the year. Maybe they are a parent. Maybe they aren't sure if this is for them. Is there something you would be able to explain to them or a tip you might give them?
I think for me, when I was thinking about it, then I really asked myself the question is like, is what I'm doing now working? And if the answer is no, I mean, for me, the answer was really no. It really wasn't working. And I felt like I thought that I knew what the answer was already. Like I was like, oh, I know all the good advice about writing. I give a lot of good advice, like I said, but I'm not following it. So like, what can this really give me? Is this going to tell me anything new that I haven't heard before? But it was the actual practice of doing it that made the difference. You can read a book and it can tell you all the right things. I was thinking this about physios, like how depressing a job being a physio must be. You have the answer, the gift to fix people, to really help people to improve their lives if they would only give you 10 minutes a day to do the exercises. And so few people I know do them. So to have something where you actually do show up for that time every single week, and it's long enough, because if you actually kind of do an online course or something for a couple of hours here or there, you don't actually get to do the practice of showing up, doing the writing, really admitting the things that were hard, really taking the time to reflect. And that was really the big thing for me, was actually I needed to be made to turn up and do those things and do them over and over again, not just for a week and not just for a month, but a good 3 months to let those habits really bed in and to allow the changes that unfolded for me in terms of my writing and my relationship to writing to kind of come to their natural new equilibrium.
That makes so much sense. And that's exactly what the program is there for. And that's exactly how I made it, the way I made it, with all the structure, the frameworks, the having to show up, the meeting times, the writing times, the coaching, to give that to people who, most people that sign up don't think they have the time. But that's the one thing that makes them take the time. And then they realize, oh, like you now are making the time in your calendar because you have seen yourself do it. You've seen the evidence as possible, even though maybe you thought it's not possible. And that is also a really amazing shift that you've made. Claire, this has been wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to you and seeing you again and having this chat and just seeing like your longer journey and really connecting. I loved this question about, what you want to do in the world, and you do it through writing. You do it through teaching, through research, right? Everything is coming together so nicely, and you are doing all the practices to make that possible, to really feel in your purpose. That is just the greatest gift we can have as writers, creatives, academics. So thank you so, so much for sharing that with all the listeners. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Nicole. It's been fun.
And if you feel that the 90-Day Write Habit Accelerator is a program that you would like to join to get your own writing over the finish line, just like Claire, go to www.writehabitaccelerator.com. The early bird discount is valid until August 31st, and then the price goes up, and the program starts September 15th. Remember, this program won't run again for a whole year, so the next time you get a chance is fall 2026. So if you have a project to finish, make sure you jump on board now.